Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. Decently interesting week I must say, especially with what we are seeing from nullsec. If you've kept an eye on the EVE subreddit, you know that the drums of war are beating. The real question of course is, are people going to actually go to war or are they going to chicken out? And from those posts, some of the comments that I find most interesting are basically asking the question of what is the end game for a sandbox like EVE Online? Are we going to end up like the Chinese server with just one mega coalition owning all of nullsec? Is that something that is inevitable? I find those types of discussions very fascinating myself, but for now we do know that at least some action is happening in nullsec, and we'll see if that will have had an impact on the market in just a little bit. But another post that I also saw that I thought was pretty interesting was about someone who claims to be a bot creator and who was going to burn it all down and crash the prices of plex. Now, you know, there is some doubt about whether or not all of what he's saying is true, especially some of his numbers do look quite bloated. But that is something that I recognize even amongst comments on my own videos, that people do tend to exaggerate greatly when it comes to their income in EVE Online to what they can actually achieve. And so maybe if we can disregard the fact that that some of his numbers look sketchy, it could be an interesting story there if indeed he is a bot creator that is actually going to like burn down the whole bot imperium or something like that. We'll see if that story has legs or if someone is just trolling the EVE Online community about bots. But we'll see. After all, we are here for the market, so let's get started. We're going to start with some plex and stuff at 2.5. Like that, and here we go. Plex going back down a little bit in Jita itself, down to 2.9 million for the sellers, 2.9 pretty much for the buyers as well. So no margin in Jita itself. When it comes to the player-owned trade hubs, it's up just a touch on the buy orders, and then we go down to, well, it's the same thing really, 2.9 million for the sellers. Now I have seen that there's some more sales going on, not necessarily in plex, but I think it's in extractors that we have another 25% sale. This will generally affect the rest of the economy as well. Of course, this is a sandbox, and if you can turn plex into extractors, or, well, you can't do vice versa. So, well, if you can turn plex into extractors, but the extractors are super cheap at the moment, bringing those to the market to actually have an impact on plex prices. Or are we seeing speculation happening on the whole bot story that people are dumping plex at the moment? Not exactly sure, but we have this strange little pullback all of a sudden after almost a month of the 5-day moving average going back up from less than 2.8 million, and we went up to almost 3 million ISK. So we'll see how that evolves. Could be quite interesting, especially if we could, for instance, get another nice buy opportunity for plex, because in my opinion, even without bots, inflation is inevitable in an economy like EVE Online, and buying low on a yearly basis I think is not a bad plan. Let's take a look at the multiple pilot training certificates. Those are continuing their ascent up to 1.13 billion ISK on the chart here. And we'll take a quick look at buyers and sellers. Sellers coming in at 1.169 billion, sellers that is, and buyers coming in at 1.120 billion. So well over a billion. And at this point continuing the ascent. So this massive dip here, which was due to, I think, double CCP sales in these multiple pilot training certificates, did create a very nice buy opportunity for less than 900 million ISK. You can see the volumes there as well of all the trades happening for these training certificates. One thing to keep in mind, of course, is that volumes are going down, and if you have hundreds of them lying around, it's not going to be too easy to sell all of those, but right now it does look like inflation is taking over again and these prices are increasing, which to me indicates that something happened, probably CCP wise, to stop the increase in price for plex. Let's take a look at the skill extractors next. Also dipped down. Kind of a weird chart. I know that there's a sale going on here, so I think that that's basically still, confusing the market a little bit. 327 million for the sellers, 317 million for the buyers. And yeah, lots of CCP sales in the last few months here. That does have an impact on the market, of course. Let's take a look at the large-scale injectors continuing their descent, now heading for 740 million, yeah, 750 for the sellers, 732 for the buyers. If I look at this chart, we are at a one-year low point, and potential investments, I think you can start making them again. Don't buy everything straight away, but this is pretty obviously a one-year low point. And I would personally, look into maybe purchasing my first few injectors, keeping a close eye on it even further. And if we go even lower down the line, you can try to lower your averages. But this chart to me does say that, it's the right time to buy some of these large-scale injectors for the longer term. Next up, we have the small scale injector, same thing. After trying to go back up towards 160 million, is currently selling again for 152 million. Buyers are coming in at 145. The pressure is on right there. And then we have the daily alpha injector that is actually back up, which to me does indicate that a lot of these yearly low points, a lot of these pullbacks are basically CCP sales showing up on the market here. So the daily alpha injectors also went to 48 million, you could say, currently selling again for 59, almost 60 million ISK, and the buyers coming in at 54 million. So this pattern, if this is bottom here, is basically, what was I looking at here? This low point here, then the daily alpha injectors would indicate that, yeah, this is the right time to buy some of these large scale injectors on this second move down here at the moment. You could probably, you can buy them for less than 750. I would say that that is definitely a price point that we will potentially go way above, and that you can make a profit on. You can clearly see here that more than 800 million is a possibility. We've been there last year quite easily. So that's our plex and stuff. Let's move on to some minerals at 715. And you may already have seen from the ticker, of course, that titanium is back up a little bit. And from my perspective, this is going to be the NOSIC activity, right? If you do deploy for a war, which the Imperium has apparently deployed a keep star in hostile territory, that of course does mean that there will be fewer people mining, ratting and all of that stuff, which will have an impact on the mineral market in general. And it has pushed the sellers of titanium, if you take a look at that, 507, so back above 5 is very good news here. And the buyers are at 489, still below 5 is. Now, the opportunity is quickly spotted, of course. Look at all of the billions of units that are coming in here. 2 billion, 2 billion, another 1.8, another 2 billion, several more in the same vein. So I would say that at least some investors are probably trying to take some profit on this increased price of titanium. But for me, the pattern here is pretty obvious. We've got some NOSIC activity, we've got some war drums beating. Even if there's not that much destruction going on right now, it already has an impact on the mineral market. We'll take a look at pyrite as well. While trying to get back above 4 ISK on average. Sellers at 408. Immediately you do see a billion and 2 billion coming in here, and the buyers at 399. We are trying to get pyrite back above 4 ISK. It's still extremely cheap though, but perhaps a real bottom might finally have been formed. The one that I would find very interesting would be Mexelon, and that does show a nice comeback as well. When as low as 65 ISK, pretty much, is already selling again for 73.27 ISK. Buyers coming in at 68.45. So this again with titanium and now Mexelon showing that sharp increase in price to well above 70 ISK all of a sudden does indicate that it's NOSIC activity that has slowed down, and that as a result, they need that Mexelon from HiSec, from other sources, in order to keep the factories going when they're not replenishing their own stocks. And in that way, before on this decrease in price, I think it's pretty safe to assume that they were basically overproducing in minerals compared to even their own production. And so they had too much of everything, way too much of some of the more common stuff like pyrite, like isogen. But even for Mexelon, they were out mining their own production. And now that their mining has ceased a little bit because of deployments, we see this increase in price, increase in demand. And what the hell is that? Sounds like something pretty damn heavy in the streets, but okay, let's move on. Here is Isogen. Try to go up in price. I find this very interesting again. Try to go up from 26 to 28 ISK and look at the response from the market. Massive dumping again, causing the price to stay at that 1 year low point. 27.66 for the sellers, 26.74 for the buyers. So you're basically paying 27 ISK for Isogen at the moment, and despite that we still have hundreds of millions of units coming in here evenly in the last 24 hours. It's going to be 400 million, 100 million, another 100 million, quite a lot of supply, and this volume actually dragged the price back down a little bit. Must have been some dumping on just 2 more ISK to get for your Isogen. It's really not a great time to be an Isogen miner at the moment. That one is definitely one of those minerals that gets overproduced very, very easily. Then we have Noxium next, went to a pretty obvious 1 year low point of close to 250 ISK. We even have a day with 226 as the average. At some point that has to stop, of course, and so we have a little bit of a bounce back, but nowhere near 300 ISK on the chart just yet. So yeah, 270 for the sellers, 252 for the buyers. That one is still oversupplied like crazy, and after breaking the 300 ISK barrier, I personally do think that we'll just start seeing Noxium move between 250 and 300 ISK at this point. When it comes to the Nullsic minerals, well, the former Nullsic minerals, here is Zydrine continuing to just slowly stay just above 500 ISK here. So 535 ISK for the sellers and 514 for the buyers. Still decent supplies, and this is something that I think has drastically changed to before the moon mining activities. It used to be that Nullsic activity, Nullsic wars, Nullsic, even the drums of wars would cause a big reaction in these Nullsic minerals, because that's where all of them would come from, or almost all of them. Now they're no longer in control of the Zydrine and the Megasite market, because people in HiSec with their moon mining activities there can just keep the supplies going, no problem. It would have to be a similar extreme situation where there's just not enough being produced in general for the economy to see an increase in price all of a sudden in those as well. And so yeah, Mexilon is by far the most obvious bottleneck in minerals. Even these Zydrine and Megasite, these former Nullsic minerals, are not apparently, because Zydrine is still staying flat at the current price, and Megasite is also just continuing to stay just around 600 ISK at this point. 616 for the sellers and 592 for the buyers. Same thing that I've been saying as well, since these moon mining operations in HiSec have gone up, you see that the volumes are a little bit different here. People bring in 1.2 million, 3 million units, 4 million units, 2.5 million units. That is the stuff that you can grab from a nice mining operation. They just package all of that up, bring it to Jita, put it up there for sale, which has caused the price to crash and has created more stability in these prices as well. And then finally, we also have Morphite that is trying to come back a little bit. So went as low as 8,500. So now it's at 8,900 for the sellers and 8,500 for the buyers. A little bit too early for me personally to decide on an investment here. But what I do find pretty noticeable here is that we have a similar reaction in the Morphite market to Nullsic activity as what we see in Mexilon and what we see in Tritanium. So those three minerals for me are the ones to potentially grab at low points, to maybe use as investments, hoping for Nullsic activity to bring changes. All the others seem to be so ubiquitous that even a comeback for Mexilon for 8 ISK all of a sudden in like about a week on Nullsic just rumblings has absolutely no impact in Isogen, no impact in Pyrite. So if you do want to get in on the mineral hype or potential for the mineral market, I would say Mexilon, Tritanium and Morphite do seem to be the ones that actually at least respond to some stuff happening in the game. The rest, personally, I think will need a CCP intervention of some sort. It can take many forms. I've said that before as well, that you could, for instance, have the new line of structures be minerals only, or you could create something that will create lots of destruction in Tech 1 ships. Things like that are possible. or an intervention straight into the mining profession, the ores, the anomalies, things like that can all have an impact, but that will have an impact on the entire mineral market. When it comes to in-game actions, it seems that it's at the moment limited to Mexlon, Morphite and Tritanium. All the others are way more oversupplied. Let's move on to our PI at 1515. Like that, and yeah, let's go over these. Ooh, kind of like that. Broadcast notes, sorry, going back to less than 2.1 million on the chart, 2.15 million almost for the sellers, but 2.1 for the buyers. That's unfortunate. If this had dropped off to 2 million, I do think that we would have had a pretty nice and clear buy opportunity for some broadcast notes. But as I've also said, the next set of structures are not necessarily as big as Astrahus and all of the other ones that we know at this point. So from my perspective, you can't be 100% sure that we'll need these advanced PI materials for them. Next up, we have the construction blocks back below average now, well below 12,000 ISK here, 11,000, well, practically 12,000 for the sellers, but 11,350 for the buyers. I would say selling at the sell price is still okay to do. You're on the average. Buyers at 11,300 are obviously at the lower end of the scale. Consumer electronics next, managing to come back a little bit towards 14,000 ISK, not bad, 14,300 for the sellers and 12,900 for the buyers. Quite a large margin, so lots of room for volatility, but at the moment definitely a pretty good price. Next up here we've got coolants continuing the increase in price, actually heading for 11,000 ISK. That's very good news for the people that stuck around on their gas planets like myself. I still have 2 of them that have been making coolants non-stop, and I've actually been hoarding them. So now 11,000 for the sellers, 10,300 for the buyers. I personally would highly recommend trying to sell at this point. If you look at this chart, this is the best it's been in 6 months by a wide margin. And we are actually very close to what I would consider to be an average price for coolants before the reduction in fuel demand that happened when POSs for moon mining were basically removed from the game and replaced by the refinery. So it's good to see that come back. It's a little bit surprising that it took this long for that to happen, but that market is definitely back and this is a nice sell opportunity. Enriched uranium, also fuel related, also trying to get back up there. 12,500 almost on the chart is not bad, even historically speaking. It's maybe a little bit less than average, but it's at least a common price that we've always known for enriched uranium. 12,200 for the sellers and 11,600 for the buyers. Definitely also at the highest point in like 6 months or so. Integrity response drones trying to fall down, but the market is keeping that one away from obvious lows. So selling for 2.55 million, buyers at 2.53 million. Yeah, that's unfortunately not. Goddamn, someone is playing with something very loud outside and it's in the street. So sorry about that, but nothing I can do about it. And yeah, integrity response drones, I would say, unfortunately, not the right time to make an investment on that. I'd be more patient. Mechanical parts, that is interesting again as well. Went to 10,000 ISK, but bounced off of that. It's a fuel-related PI material. 11,100 for the sellers, 10,300 for the buyers. Another nice opportunity. 11,000 is actually a regular price for mechanical parts. Again, just like with coolants from before the moon mining changes. Nuclear reactors continuing to stay quite low. I have a small investment in that one myself. 92,000 for the sellers, 88,000 for the buyers. The margin is closing though, so that one could be primed for changes at any time, in my opinion, just because, you know, the volumes are not that great. The margins have been closing, so there's a bit more upwards pressure from the buyers, I think. Who knows? Let's hope that we can get that volatility to come back as well. Organic mortar applicators actually breaking out from a pretty low point. 1 million is definitely a buy opportunity at the low end of the chart, and now we're back towards 1.2 million. So 1.2 for the sellers, 1.13 for the buyers. I'd say that is actually pretty close to an average price of what we can expect for organic mortar applicators. Nice little comeback, but it's obviously coming back from a very low point where we could have made some nice investments, I think. Robotics next, still continuing the slow trend up and now basically consolidating its price above 100,000 ISK, which again historically for fuel-related PI is normal. 102 to 104,000 almost for the sellers, 96,000 for the buyers. Basically a good time to also bring some more robotics to the market, I think. Self-harmonizing power cores continuing to stay in the 2.2 million range, basically not much to say. 2.15 million for the first sellers, 2.2 for most of them, 1.9 million for the buyers. That is pretty low actually. 1.9 million is below the entire chart. So for me personally, self-harmonizing power cores, if you have the patience for a buy order, that is where I would make my advanced PI material investment this week. It seems pretty obvious. 1.9 million. Look at the entire chart. It's below the entire chart here. So it's a little bit of a gamble, but if the next set of structures also require advanced PI materials, then this is pretty much a guaranteed investment that's going to make you a nice ISK. Superconductors staying quite flat at, well, an average price, I think, 11,750 for the sellers and 11,000 for the buyers. Maybe even the buyers are probably a little bit below average. So here, just like with construction blocks, have the patience to put up a sell order and try to get at least an average price for your superconductors. Test cultures actually falling off. That is quite interesting. Look at that, 7,500. I find this very interesting. 8,400 for the sellers, but 7,540 for the first buyer. And here from this spike here, you should see that test cultures is definitely tied to these advanced PI materials and thus to structures. Again, in the scenario that we once again need advanced PI for the next set of structures as well. Here we are at the low end of the charts, 7,500 for the buyers. Lack of demand is pretty obvious here as well. If we take a look at it's even including the player-owned trade hubs. This is another one, just like with the self-harmonizing power cores, where I would personally dare to put up a buy order and try to grab some of that cheap test culture supply. Next up, we've got the wetware mainframes after dipping to almost 2 million. So that was a nice buy opportunity. We recovered. We're back on the average. So unfortunately, they don't last very long. 2.3 million for the sellers, 2.2 for the buyers, but they do exist here. Self-harmonizing power cores, not very visible on the chart, but the buyers here are obviously below everything. So very interesting PI week here again. Nice comeback from the fuel-related PI materials, and from time to time, some opportunities like this week, self-harmonizing power cores and test cultures do show up for that investment, taking the gamble that we'll need PI for the next set of structures, of course. Next up, Tech One chips at 22.55. I think we can go over these pretty quickly. There is a bit of a comeback in Mexilon and Tritanium, but I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference just yet. We would need to see some actual big fights, big losses, lots of fleets gone, before, and including Tech One fleets as well, which are not in the meta at the moment. From what I've read so far, it's been Gila fleets that have been lost, Ishtar fleets that have been lost. I mean, crazy. To me personally, such an expensive ship, Tech 2 cruiser, to wield the whole fleet and then to lose it does feel quite expensive, but that is the situation. The meta is not for Tech 1 ships, and so we see the Apocalypse break to the 130 million mark, 128 for the sellers, 113 for the buyers. Super cheap, but also a tiny market. You can see that the volumes are not big and the buyers are definitely not big in volumes either. The Caracal continuing the descent, actually playing with 8 million at this point. First sellers coming in at less than 8 million, is 7.5 for the buyers. Super cheap once again. Catalyst, same thing here, diving down to a million ISK, 1 million for the sellers, and just under a million for the buyers. So there's not much to say except that, you know, Tech 1 is not in the meta. There is not enough destruction. There's way too much production, and with those low mineral prices, we're just not going anywhere with the Tech 1 chip market, unfortunately. So the Drake tried to come back to more than 40 million ISK, but the pressure is on right away. Look at that, in the last 24 hours, all of this has been brought in and is competing at the 40.5 million mark. Just a slight opportunity, a slight comeback here for the Drake creates all of that production, all of that, you know, extra supply, trying to at least take some profits out of your Tech 1 production. It's very understandable, but it does mean that prices get crashed down quite quickly again. Ferox, slow descent to a 1-year low point again, 38 million now for the first seller, 35.7 for the buyers. Megatron bouncing off the 130 million mark, so there might be some interesting Megatrons, but it's 138 for the sellers, 122 million for the buyers. It's actually a decent margin here and a bit of a volume spike, so some buying for some Megatrons, maybe just like a Megatron fleet out there in nullsec, caused a slight increase in price. I would personally expect more supply to come in very quickly. It's already starting here with 10 of them. So yeah, any increase in price is immediately spotted by industrialists and gets plugged very quickly. The Oracle, ouch, next leg down to 50 million ISK now, 54 million for the sellers, 48 million for the buyers. 1-year low point, super cheap again. There's not much to say. That, you know, nobody's flying Oracles apparently. Availability because of that is also not great. I mean, you do have 90 of them here, but the rest of it is quite timid in numbers, so this is not even an incentive for a big alliance to come in and buy some Oracle fleets or anything like that. It's just, you know, a tiny market that is really not at the forefront at the moment. Raven, same story, heading down to 130 million. 131 for the sellers, 120 for the buyers. 120 million, that's normally, I think that used to be like a battle cruiser, and now you get a battleship for that. Here's the Retriever, also 1-year low point, heading for 17.5 million, 18 for the buyers and 17.2 for the sellers, sorry, 18 million for the sellers and 17.2 million for the buyers. Continuing to slide down, Tempest. Tempest actually holding a little bit better than most other battleships. 140 million for the sellers, 121 for the buyers though. Slightly better in volumes as well. Might be a little bit more in the meta. Just like the Megatron, maybe someone did buy a Megatron fleet or something like that. But overall, it's still super cheap. The Thrasher also 1-year low point, continuing to go down. 834,000 for the sellers, and no buyers coming in at 800,000 ISK. Tornado, another leg down as well, on even more supplies, all of a sudden crashing the price to less than 50 million. Less than 50 million for the sellers, 44 million for the buyers. Really pretty damn crazy. Next up here we get the Tristan, staying at, well, also going down, less than 450. 490 for the sellers, 450 for the buyers. A little bit interesting to see a volume spike here, but you know, it's just impossible, I think, to really sway the Tech 1 market at this point. Venture doing decently well here at 250,000 ISK, but you know, it's only a little frigate. Next up we've got the Vexor trying to get back to 9 million, but already being squashed back down, now selling for 8.4 million ISK. And in the last 24 hours, well, that's the full front page. So that's the same story as what we saw with the Drake here. We see an increase in price and producer just come out of the woodwork. Everyone brings their Vexors, they try and sell them. You know what, really, 9 million, close to 9 million, let's try bring in Vexors, and it crashes the price right down. It does look so cool in that peak though. It looks a little bit like, yeah, better lighting and shadow on that one. But Tech 1 market, the story is pretty obvious. The super low minerals, the oversupply in minerals has created very cheap ships in order to produce them. And unfortunately, with Tech 1 ships not being in the meta, there's just not enough destruction to absorb anything that is being brought to the market. So we have very low prices, lots of 1-year low prices, and any of the comebacks gets squashed very quickly by more supply. Let's move on to the Tech 2 market then at 29.10. All right, let's go. I mostly check the frigates, of course. I think if you want to make investments, those are small enough, bigger in volumes, so potentially I think you can have an easier time finding trades, but we've not been very successful in the last couple of months since the changes to moon mining happened, because prices have basically been super high. We continue to pay that premium and we don't really see any of the drop-offs in the last month or so. So the Ares is still selling for 33 million, buyers are coming in at 30 million. That's, you know, that's the new normal for this ship, but it also means that I'm not really able to trade in any of these. Here is the Cerberus next. Did have a nice little spike up, probably in anticipation of the event, and I think the Cerberus is pretty good for the event, but we also see a pretty sharp drop off here. I would say it is possible that people have found out that this one is not really a cruiser event this time, because your main target for the loot is actually a battleship, so you actually want some nice DPS there, and I'm very much enjoying flying my Dominics in the event that's going on at the moment, rather than any of my exploration cruisers. So nice little spike from the Cerberus, doesn't last very long, and the buyers are coming in at 282 million ISK, which is around here on the chart. So yeah, not a pronounced buy opportunity or anything like that at all. The Claw is landing on 30 million, buyers at 28 million. Perhaps you could risk some Claw purchases, hoping that some nullsec interceptor fleets get blapped and that people rush to some Claws. I wouldn't blame you for doing that, but that soft landing, you know, we need to see more volatility to make that a sure thing. The Crow is going down as well, but still staying above 30 million. Buyers at 28 million, that's not a lot. That's definitely not a lot of them. Keep one eye on the Crow, I would say. If this buy order somehow gets filled, then any more supply could really bring that price down, and you could actually have a slight opportunity. That is very weird to see this happen, but that's the situation. The Crusader next, staying above 30 million. There's no way I could say that you should buy or sell here. Heretic did drop down to 70 million ISK and is already on its way back up a little bit. 80 for the sellers, 64 million for the buyers. It's just a tiny market though. You even have days where only a single Heretic is being traded. That makes it very difficult, in my opinion, to look for trading in there. The stealth bombers are sometimes even, I would say, the most interesting category, because, you know, they are often quite used a lot in those big fights just to try and have some successful bombing runs. You also lose them from time to time, and so here, for instance, for the Hound, we could have bought these for 28 million. They're currently selling for 40 million ISK. There's a lack of supply in the Hounds, and this one is definitely something that you can sell right now. The Ishtar next, let's take a look at that, landing at 250 million. So I would have maybe expected a bit of an impact from that Ishtar wipeout that I read about, but nope, 258 for the sellers, 240 for the buyers. It's basically stable at this price range, so I want to see it even lower to say, okay, we should actually start buying some Ishtars, but at least it's not at the much higher price of like 300 to 350 million ISK. Manticore also a little bit higher, but 37 million ISK. You could probably sell some here, but actively trading, very difficult to do. Nemesis is interesting though, breaking through the 30 million mark. Look at these average, 26 million, buyers coming in at 21 million. All right, for the first time in a very long time, I would say try to grab some Nemesis here from these buy orders. Try to go up between 21 and 25 million ISK. Definitely very cheap, below the entire chart. Okay, quite a bit of a surprise, but very interesting. Selling for 31, buyers at 21 million ISK. This is, in my opinion, the time to try and grab a couple of cheap Nemesises and try to get in on that. It's also a stealth bomber, it's used quite often, and if for instance people want Hounds, but these cost 40 million ISK, and they find out that, well, here's another option, let's grab some the Nemesis instead, then potentially this could be a very nice investment considering these buy orders. Surprising, but yeah, Nemesis, something to look into for sure. Pontifex too stable at a high price, not even gonna cover that. Purifier still staying well clear of the 30 million mark, so selling for 33.4, buyers are at 31. That's completely different from the Nemesis here. That's a big no for me again, unfortunately. Raptor is dropping off, but still above 30 million, so I'm like 28 million for the buyers, maybe. The 414 here is nice. That could definitely help bring that price back down, but it's not an obvious buy opportunity just yet. Saber, again, working its way back up to above 80 million, so you could sell them if you can like produce them, but to trade in them feels risky. Stiletto staying too stable, that's a no. Well above 30 million, buyers at 29.4, it's too early. Stork stable at 75, and then finally the Terran is breaking through the 30 million mark. Let's see where the buyers are. 27 million, 29 for the sellers. Lack of buyers is pretty obvious as well. Maybe it's not as obvious as the Nemesis, but maybe you could also try to grab some Terranis at like 28 million ISK or something like that. Hope for interceptor action and some much needed replacements there. That would be good. This, though, to me is the most interesting thing that I've seen in a very long time in the Tech 2 market. The bottom falling out of the buyers of the Nemesis stealth bomber. 21 million are the bids here. That is quite unseen, really sharp drop off. In my opinion, if you look at this in the past, definitely anything you grab below 25 million could be a very interesting investment. This is a trade potential, I think, and it's been a very long time since we've seen one like this in the Tech 2 market. Next up, the Tech 3 market at 36 minutes. Let's take a look at these. You might already have been able to tell that the Tengu is not going anywhere, so I'm personally a little bit curious to see how our oversupply situation is doing here. The Confessor obviously brought back down to 30 million as well, and now selling for 33 million. Buyers are at 30 million and 78, 23, 21. I mean, this is a couple of hundred Confessors here. It's not too bad, but it's definitely a lot. So let's keep that in mind. Buying at 30 million, I'd say that's okay to do as well. If you want to grab a couple extra Confessors. I think I doubled my investment as well, put in another 100 million and grabbed some extra Confessors myself. Hecate under pressure, look at the volumes here and going well below 40 million ISK. So 36 million for the sellers, for the last one, 38 for most of them, 33 million for the buyers. But yeah, look at that, 29, 30, 73, 44 here. That's again, we're seeing more tactical destroyers coming in here. It's nothing too crazy, it's not 200, 300 or anything like that, but it's definitely pretty high in volumes and continuing to put pressure on the price. The Jackdaw up a little bit to 47, that's actually up a decent amount, 43 million, but the response, 129 here all of a sudden. I still have... There's two potential scenarios that are playing around in my head at this point. If Nullsec does blow up, of course, then investments here, even in the Jackdaw for less than 40 million could be great. Hecate could be alright. Confessor seems like really good opportunity, but we also see that there are supplies waiting out there. So if that does not happen, then we could definitely see the Jackdaw fall pretty seriously to a much lower point than it is trading at the moment. So that's the gamble that you're taking basically when you're investing in these tactical destroyers right now. The Zwepel still under pressure below 35 million ISK, and here is what I was personally fearing, 240, 199, and this one is just a couple of days ago. That is that oversupply potential that we definitely have to keep in mind as well. There is some stuff happening in Nullsec, and the Jackdaw and the Confessor are very popular there, but there's also stuff happening on the supply front that might actually counter all of that or even bring the price back down substantially. Let's see if that also translates in the cruisers. Here is the Legion, obviously under pressure, still very expensive, and 106, 180 here. Gotta be careful, 162 for the sellers, 146 for the buyers. It's an okay price, I would say. It's doable, it's not super expensive. So, you know, again, decent prices, but supply-wise, some really big sell orders showing up. Here's the Loki next, basically trading in the 200 to 250 million mark, but 192, 288, 468 at 250 million. That is pretty obviously gonna put a ceiling on the price. So trading is happening between the buyers and the sellers. But just look at the volumes. That again is not too good. Proteus continuing its decline, breaking through 150 million. And we get a 180 here, we get 60, we get 54 here for that ship that costs like almost half the low key, and we still see several hundred coming in just a few sell orders. So again, also a couple days ago, 180. Yeah, definitely a worrying pattern. Same here with the Tengu, back at the average low price of less than 150 million. Supply wise, we still have 151, 64 and 600 of them coming in here at 145 million. The competition is happening below that, but when these guys lose patience, we might actually see more relisting at lower prices. So for the Tech 3 market, personally, Confessor, Jackdaw, very popular in nullsec. Gambles you could still take, especially the Confessor, looking at where the chart is at, but keep in mind oversupply is still constantly peeking around the corner with some surprising numbers here and there. So you have to be careful when it comes to these investments, I think. And then for the extra products, I thought we would take a look at the faction cruisers at 4040. The reason is that, you know, Gila fleet wiped out. That's what I read from the fight around the Keep Star that the Imperium has successfully anchored. It's like Gila fleet lost, Ishtar fleet lost. So it's those cruisers, they are definitely in the meta at the moment, and I want to see if that has had an impact on the faction cruisers. So we get cruisers, we get faction cruisers. Let's quickly start with the Navy factions. That is, of course, faction warfare related. So the Augur Navy issue actually coming from a low point of less than 50 million is coming back up a little bit. The Caracal is trading for 70 million, is probably a high point. I would definitely try to sell what I can at this point. Executor Navy issue is actually dropping back to 75 million ISK. So that is normalizing, getting back to its average. The Omen, yeah, not very popular. Abysmal volumes, staying at just above 50 million. Any action in the Osprey? Yeah, come back in the last couple of months, again back on the average. So that's interesting. You get Kaldari and Galente ships that do converge back towards their averages. Where will they go from here? That's always the question, of course. Sight fleet issue though, massive drop off from 70 million to 50 million. So from a sell opportunity to practically a buy opportunity. 45 million for the buyers. That's practically a buy opportunity right there, I would say. Stabber fleet issue, so Minmatar crashing down from 1 year high point here, also back down to no demand and less than 50 million for the buyers. And then finally we've got the Vexor Navy issue, same thing here, also crashing down from very much a high point of 130 million, coming back with buyers at less than 70 million ISK. This one is very interesting to me. Vexor massive drop off, and then we have the Augur Navy issue. That's actually not. It's Executor, yeah, also dropping off. All right, yep. From my perspective, Galente look at and Minmatar look at potential real buy opportunities forming, considering the momentum. And then we've got the pirate factions. Let's see if what those are doing. So the Ashimu actually 1 year low point. 75 for the sellers, 63 million for the buyers. I would dare to say try and grab a couple. Would make sense to me. Cinnabal actually 1 year high point then. Selling currently for, well, there are no sellers. Couple of sellers here for 171 million indie player owned trade hubs. That is very strange. All right, if you have Caracal lying around that you're not using or anything like that, I actually think I have two. You might want to take that profit. Interesting, strange move. The Ortrus back up a little bit. I wonder if that's me with the Explortrus, perhaps. It's not that big of a move. It's still quite affordable, but it is 217 million for the sellers and 200 million for the buyers. Maybe I have like a little bit of an impact with those videos to increase the popularity of the Ortrus and bring the price back to slightly above average, but it's nothing too major. The Phantasm actually dropping off from a high point, heading for less than 100 million, buyers at 100 million. Okay, interesting volatility in this category here. Stradios, after going to a 1 year low point, actually taking back up a little bit on increased volumes as well. 200 million for the sellers, 184 for the buyers. Here, what I could surmise is that perhaps the Stradios is a very good ship for tier 1, tier 2 Abyss. And, you know, you also have Covered Up's Cloak, so in case of trouble in riskier space, you can get out as well. And of course, we have the rebalance that happened with the last patch. That should give you more loot, more incentive to grind those lower tiers. The Gila is at a high point, slowly coming back down. I should probably sell my 4 Gilas that I bought myself as an investment, because they are still selling for 275 million, bars at 255. Still super popular, very expensive, and to me a bit of a surprise that they're actually being flown in nullsec as well. And finally we have the Vigilant that is below average but not by too much. So buyers are at 181. Maybe it feels risky, of course, on the Vigilant because it is very low in volumes. Very interesting faction cruiser markets this time around. Lots of volatility, including in the Navy factions and some of these pirate factions, with, well, the Ashimu 1 year low point by quite a margin. Very interesting. Might be the time for me to actually grab one. I don't think I've ever owned an Ashimu. Could you use that in exploration? Let's take a quick look at the fitting. 3 missiles, 5 high slots, 4 mids, 6 lows. That's kind of okay. What about drones? 40 and no turret. So it is missiles drones, which I absolutely like. You've got a lot of low slots. Yeah, maybe I should look into that. Maybe I should look into an Ashimu for an exploration ship. No good bonuses though. Stasis web, energy neutralizers, and bonus to medium energy turrets. Oh, sorry. God damn it. I was looking at launchers here, but it's actually turret hardpoint. So you get 3 lasers, you get some drones, which should give you versatility. Do you have extra room for drones? No, that's unfortunate. Not that great, unless you go with the right drones right off the bat. Maybe. We'll see. We'll see. It's super cheap right now. Maybe I'll just buy a couple of Ashimus just as an investment as well. Anyways, that's going to be it for this week, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.